Hey everybody, this is Pastor Paul here. We're just beginning our next lesson of the Old Testament. We're going to talk about something that we talked about last month more. We focused more on that last month, and that was creation. So we talked about creation last month. We did that with our service project where we went out and cleaned up the ditches. We also did that with our creative project where we created pictures about creation. You made some cupcakes and that type of things. So that's sort of what we're going to start delving into. So we're going to look at creation. And before we get into a more into what this lesson is about today, I think it's important to talk about science and faith. So often right now, I think we see these two things, science and faith, as sort of adversaries. We see them as butting up against each other, and that's really not. They shouldn't be the case anymore, because science and faith answer two distinctly different types of questions. Science is more designed to tell you, like, what's happening, how is it happening. Those type of things. Let's see. If you think of the 5 questions: who, what, when, where, why, it's what, when, where is generally what science does. And I have a lot of practice with science. My first degree was chemistry. I have a bachelor's of science in chemistry from the University of Iowa, and I know a lot about science because I spent 4 years studying it. I learned physics, I learned biology, and I learned all sorts of stuff. And then when I include my nuclear medicine training, again, I learned even more. I learned about biology, nuclear properties and traits and structures, and the decay and stuff like that. So I really understood what science was. And science is really good at sort of analyzing the world. I think in all of this, one thing we have to remember is, and one important piece of confirmation is, God never wants us to shut off our brain. Okay, God gave us a brain in order for us to think things through, and so I don't want you to ever think, well, I can't ask that type of question. You can always ask that question. God is always wanting us to learn more and to ask more questions. We're always learning and growing with our faith, and so I think it's important to ask questions. So as we think of science is good at answering those type of questions. They're really good at showing us how hot it needs to be for water for it to boil. We look at it for how particles come together. So this is the important piece of science. And your Bible, this is not a science book, okay? The point of faith, the point of the Bible, is to answer some of the questions that science can't answer. And science is not interested in the who or the why. Science doesn't care why we're on this world. There's nothing in science that cares about that. And the Bible's not so interested in, like, physical laws. We don't see Moses doing science experiments on in the desert floor as they walk to the promised land. They're more concerned with, the Bible's more concerned with the relationships with God. It's more concerned with why are we here? The questions of morality, questions of what do we do in order to have good relationships? What do we do? How do we react when we do something wrong? These are the type of questions that faith talks about, and faith leans sort of into, where science doesn't. So you can be, and I know very many scientists who are Christians, scientists who have faith, scientists who are Muslim and Hindu, and all these other types of faiths. So science and faith, and for this particular course, we're Christians. So I know several Christian scientists as well. My wife is one. My wife has a PhD in physics. And she believes in God, and she believes that coexistence between science and faith, because they are supposed to be used. And if we look at the early scientists, they were people of faith, because their faith, they wanted to see how God created the world and how God structured the world. So I want you to think of, I never want you to think that faith and science are antagonistic to each other. They just answer different questions, and we use them for different things. So as we think of all these things, I want you to sort of to keep that in your back pocket. That those are two questions that. Are two things that we just need to keep in our minds about science and faith. So, thank you for that short. I know all of you are very excited about listening to me yamble on about that. So, all right. Well, let's get started here. So, for announcements this week, so I will have the online, what we're going to be doing for online, as well as for in person up shortly. For online, again, I think we're going to do that same thing, have you come on around 7:30 to 8 o'clock and do small groups. And we'll have you do an online quiz or something along those lines for what we're going to be doing to be similar to what we're doing with in person. So I'm going to try to, and I'll have that stuff up for you for online, hopefully Monday night, if not Tuesday at the latest. So you'll have an opportunity to work on that. So. And again, I apologize for the video being released on Sunday. Unfortunately, I had a couple emergency visits I had to do, and that sort of caused me to have this video come out a little later than I had hoped. And next week, which is and I'm going to look at my calendar, the 28th, we'll have our creative time, and I'm still working on what that'll look like for looking at creativity of the Old Testament. Again, we're working on creation right now. We might do something more geared towards relationships like we sort of did with our service project for this month. So I think those are all the announcements I need to make for right now. And we'll fly into this. And so the quiz that we'll take right now, again, you can memorize the answers or know them. So as we go through them, we'll go through them again like we did last. I was just looking at the candy dish. So I got to get that filled up too. So I hopefully won't forget to do that. So we're going to take a look at the first thing. And so we're talking about creation. We were talking about the how science and religion answer two different questions. But there is some things from science that we sort of need to look at in terms of sort of pointing to God. So there's two basic laws of physics. One is nothing comes from nothing. The second is something had to. B, for every action there is an equal and opposite complaint. C, the universe is expanding, just step on a scale. And D, lactic acid bacteria under anaerobic conditions converts lactic acid into pyruvic acid, thus sauerkraut. And as much as I like B, C, and D, but there's a little bit of difference from what I actually studied. It has to be A. Something had to. So something comes from nothing. We'll talk about that a little bit more once we talk about the Big Bang, which is, where did the energy for the Big Bang come from? Again, when we think of religion, we think those questions, we think of that religion answers who and why. Where did the energy for the Big Bang come from? Either A, from God, B, nowhere, C, hot air generated from Washington, D.C., or you could say at church from me, or D, a parallel universe run by aliens from the planet Krypton. And bonus points if you can think of what superhero comes from the planet Krypton. And the answer is A. So where did the energy for the Big Bang come from? It came from God. Chance is no thing. B, a concept, not a creative force. C, not worth betting your eternity upon. Or D, all the above and then some. And you all know by now, you've been in confirmation enough to know when you see D like that, you go with D. There we go, D, all the above. All right, so coincidence is not a possible answer for the existence of the universe because in order for a coincidence to occur, you need mass, energy, time, and space. B, in order for a coincidence to occur, you need to have at least two incidents. Or C, both A and B, and D, neither A nor B. You probably know, I don't think we've ever had an answer that was neither A nor B, so you could probably guess from this that it is indeed C, both A and B. And I know we're talking a little bit more about These are a little bit more scientific than what I think we would be going over, but we'll talk about that a little bit more once we get to some of the other stuff. So the universe is wonderfully complex, true, impossibly to fully comprehend with the human brain. C, most rationally understood as the result of a master design rather than a random chance, which is a concept, not a creative force, and all the above, and then some. And again, when we have an answer like these, what do we normally say? D, all the above. And human beings are, this is going to sound very familiar. I think we just went over this. Wonderfully complex, impossibly to fully comprehend. Most rationally understood as a result of a master design rather than a random chance, which is a concept, not a creative force. Or D, all the above and then some. What is it? D, all the above and then some. Okay. So next one, how does the Bible say humans are different from all other creatures? Humans are made out of a different biological template. Humans are made in the image and likeness of God. God breathed into humans a living eternal spirit, or both B and C. We have a lot of D tonight, both B and C. And so we sort of talked about this at the beginning when I had that sort of conversation about science and faith. Science can tell us the how of a lot of things, but it can't tell us the who's, the why's, both A and B, how to keep your face from breaking out for high school pictures, or for just junior high pictures, or for any type of pictures. As much as we would like to say D, it actually is C, the who's and the why's. All right, in Psalm 8, I know we haven't read that yet, but as we look at the answers, I think you're going to know what the answer is. The writer suggests humans have been made only a little lower than God, crowned with glory and honor by God, given dominion, power over the works of God's hands, or, say it with me, all the above, D. Okay. So our theme verse for tonight comes from out of Psalm 8, 1 through 6. So let's go back and we'll begin it again. So this is the theme verse that we're sort of working with tonight. And it's a lot of Psalms again. Go back and talk about different other pieces of the Bible. And we're talking about the creation again. So this psalm, or song, if you want to think of it that way, because that's what it really is. It's really a song that the ancient Hebrews would say, is this: O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. And I think if you haven't heard this yet, I think you can Google. There's a song, there's a very popular Christian song with that I think you probably like. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouths of babes and infants you have founded a bulwark because of your foes, to silence the enemy and the avenger. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established. What are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made them a little lower than God, and crowned them with glory and honor, and you have given them dominion over the works of your hands, and you have put all things under their feet. So I think this psalm just sort of really gets at when we think of, if you go outside and look at the night stars, you can see, if you're don't have city lights around you, you can just see those stars above you. You can see planets. You can see all sorts of wonderful things. And it's hard to imagine that the force that made those things, God's hands that made those stars, those planets, that ever-expanding galaxy, also created us. And that God loves us, that God wants the best for us, and that God has given us a mission on this earth to take care of the creation and take care of each other and to show people what this love of God looks like. And so I think Psalm 8, 1 through 6 sort of gives us that reminder of what our sort of our marching orders are. So the one thing we want to remember tonight, God, not chance, is the creator of all that exists. All right, so you might be wondering, and we've talked about this, you saw it in the quiz as well too, you're like, well, what does this mean? Why are we sort of talking about this? Because what some people will say, there's no God. And then when you ask them, well, how did the earth come about? They'll say, well, it was just chance. As a scientist myself, you have to have a little bit more to go on than that. Just that. I mean, currently one of the theories for how the world began or the universe began is by a big bang, and that there was matter at the beginning, and then boom, stuff was sort of shot out, and that's where stars began to form, planets began to form, and stuff like that. And there's a lot of scientific models that talk about that. But the question that the scientists still can't answer is, how did that matter get there? And then some of the other interesting things about Earth is, I think there's like 7 golden constants. Like if one of these constants was even just a decimal place off, that there wouldn't be life on Earth. And so there is a lot of coincidences or chances that took place for us to be here. And I don't know about you, but I think, and this is the reason why I believe in God, that there was some design behind the project, that there is a designer in God who shapes the world and shapes how we move in the world and how the world was created. And so I think that's what we're sort of really getting at, that you're just not some galactic chance. We didn't just, God, the universe, if you want to say it that way, didn't just roll the dice and, well, we got lucky and we got the planet to show up and we got the, all the conditions for life to work out and stuff like that. We believe that God is there and that God has designed the world and God has designed creation. He designed you and me. And that's really, I think, something just to sort of for us to remember. So let's talk about, again, we talked about the Big Bang. If all matter came from a momentary burst of energy, where did that energy come from? Again, we talked about, there's several scientific theories that talk about matter. The small point of matter at the beginning of the universe that exploded out, and that created the galaxy. And in some sense, that's very compatible with what we learn in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. Let there be light, boom, that type of thing. So we'll get through this. And so I think when we think of creation, I think a lot of times we're stuck with thinking about and I think it's important, we should talk about the universe. There are 100 billion galaxies in the universe. There are 100 billion stars in each galaxy. That's a lot of stars. And there's a lot of, there's quasars, there's black holes, there's comets, there's asteroid fields. There's so many different types of stars. There's, it's totally amazing. This is why people like Star Trek and stuff like that, because they get to see some of these very, very interesting cosmic phenomenon. But also with that, I think the interesting thing too is you have that macro view, but we forget about the micro view, that the most simple living cell is in perfect order. That how God created our bodies, one of the films I always used to, when we were in health class one time, we're talking about how we're always humans, the way we walk, or we're always teetering on the edge of catastrophe. Just the way that we walk is an amazing thing, or how our immune systems respond to stuff, or how we grow, or all these other interesting things, how our eyes work, how our ears work. And same with all the other creatures around, and how cellularly our cells work and how they reproduce and split and stuff like that. There's an amazing process around that, and God created that as well too. And I think it's interesting that it's not just a macro view, but it comes down to what we're even made of. And I think that's something important to think about as well too. So in all of this creation that we've sort of talked about today. So I think the big take-home lessons, I know I've rambled on a little bit, but there's big takeaway lessons, and I'll just put them on the screen. Faith and science. Faith and science, they answer distinctly different questions from each other, and I think that's important to note. The big thing we know is that God created the world, the universe, us, and everything else. So you were created by God, and I think that's important to remember and to celebrate. You're not here by chance. You have been designed, and you are a loving creature of God. So God is our creator, not chance. I'm trying to think, and also just marvel. I think this week just sort of marvel in creation. You know, the macro view with the skies, the stars, but also just sort of be thankful for your hands. You know, the cells within your skin cells, your hair cells, and even though I know your face drives you nuts because I know we all get pimples and blemishes and all that other type of stuff, but you know, all of this was created by God, and it's just interesting the variety and the variation that God has created. So those are the things that I want you sort of to take with. So again, I'll send out the online stuff for the online folks. So if you want to do online, again, we'll have an activity that we'll have you do before you come to class. You can do it that half an hour right before we have small group time. Small group time will be from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. Again, I think that worked well, and we'll do that. I'll do that here in my office again, and I think that worked pretty well. And I might just be a couple moments late as I take my laptop from the fellowship hall to here. Well, I hope you enjoyed my ramblings for today, and I hope you have a great week, and hopefully it won't snow, because I heard it's supposed to snow this week. I hope that part we don't get. We take care, God bless, and we'll talk to you later.